Hello and welcome to my next video. In this tutorial, I would like to show you how to configure a new GitHub workflow and a few interesting things which will help you configure it in no time. At the end of this video, you'll know precisely how to navigate through GitHub and create new workflows, trigger workflows manually, create a job that runs only when another job succeeds, and how to use GitHub context and access its data. But before we start, just a quick reminder that Codercy is not only a YouTube channel, but you can find also my account in other social media like LinkedIn, Facebook or Instagram. With all of that said, let's figure out what exactly are GitHub Actions, or rather is GitHub Actions. Well, it is nothing else than a CI/CD platform. To put it simply, it is a platform which allows us to automate builds, testing and deployment, and many other things related to the process in your project or a company. In practice, we define workflows which are triggered whenever some event happens in our repository. An event can be a push to branch, merge to the main branch, or deployment update, and many more that can happen in our repository. Each workflow consists of jobs running in their own machine runner, and each job can have multiple steps responsible for the actual action like code check, running tests, or creating a deployment. Lastly, each workflow is nothing else than a YAML file placed inside the .github/workflows directory of our project. With all of that said, let's figure out how to create our first workflow. So, as the first step, let's navigate to our GitHub repository. As you can see on my screen, I have an empty repo, and following, let's click on the actions right here. On this page, we can see a bunch of templates which we can use to speed up our job related to deployment, continuous integration, automation. It may happen that you will find something useful for you right here. In our case, we'll start with the simple workflow and let's click the configure button. As we can see, the editor opened and we can see an example workflow. Let me note that, as you can see right here, it is put inside the .github/workflows directory and its name is blank. I'll call it, for example, 1.yaml. Let's clear up a bit. If you are interested in learning what exactly is right here, then I highly encourage you to do these steps on your own. But for the simplicity, I'll get rid of these comments because we don't need them here. Also, this one, I would like to get rid of this here. So, to sum up, we've defined a new GitHub Actions workflow named CI, which will be triggered whenever we push a new commit to the main branch. Our workflow consists of one job, build, which will be run on the Ubuntu runner. And our job has two steps, which will be invoked one after another. The first one is a one-line script, which will print out hello world, and the second one is a multi-line script, which will also print out some data to the output. Quite easy, isn't it? So with all of that done, let's commit our changes to the main branch. Let me click on Commit Changes button, create one.yam, and commit directly to the main branch. In real life, you will create a pull request. So, commit changes. Excellent. So, with all of that done, how can we see whether the workflow was actually triggered? Let's get back to the Actions tab. And right now we can see all workflows. If we will have multiple of them in our project, then on the left side you will see names of them. As we can see, our workflow ran, so let me click on it. Right here we can see all of our jobs, and we had one job build. Let me click on the name. And inside it, we can see a bunch of things like the setup jobs, run actions, and what's more important for us, right here we have our steps. So this is the step 1, which printed out hello world, and the step 2 consisting of 2 printed out lines. As we can see, everything runs successfully and the expected text is printed out here. So to sum up, this workflow will be triggered whenever someone pushes a new commit to the main branch. But can we trigger it manually? Well, The answer is yes, but in order to do so, we must get back to our YAML file and edit the config. So let me find the code. GitHub Workflows, 1.yaml, and right here on the right side, I can edit this file. And in GitHub Actions, in order to trigger the workflow manually, we must configure the event, which is workflow dispatch. So 2 spaces workflow dispatch. And basically, that's all we need. Let me commit changes, update 1YAML, commit directly to the main branch. Excellent. So to be more specific, this event, workflow dispatch, allows us to trigger our workflow using the GitHub API, GitHub CLI, and what we'll see in a moment using the browser like here. So let me go to the actions. Again, we can see that the workflow was run the second time automatically. When I click on the name of our workflow, CI, we'll see that a new bar is right here. This workflow has a workflow dispatch event trigger, which means that I can click run workflow and select the branch from which I would like it to run. So when I hit run, we will see that workflow run was successfully requested. In a moment, the workflow started to run. When I click on that, we can see that it's at the moment in progress. And when I click on the build, again, we can verify that everything is working as expected. Wonderful. So at this point, we know how to trigger them automatically, trigger them manually. But what if we'd like to disable it for some reason? Well, we can get back to actions, navigate to our workflow, hit right here, and simply disable the workflow. So after that, whenever we merge to the main, it will not be triggered in this particular case. So at this point, everything is quite easy. So let's figure out a bit more about the GitHub context and debugging in GitHub Actions. So let's start with the first one, context. Context allows us to access information about the workflow runs, variables, run environments, jobs, and steps. And if you are looking, for example, for commit SHA, PR author, branch name, or maybe GitHub access token, then this is the exact place you should be looking for. On my page, you can see the official documentation of GitHub context, and whenever you need some information or would like to access particular data, I highly encourage you to visit this place and figure out whether this is accessible. You can see right here we have a bunch of context and also related links to the particular objects, for example, to the GitHub context. We can figure out what exactly data are placed within it and the description for them. So definitely a useful place for you. But from my end, as a part of this tutorial, I would like to show you a useful tip if you would like to debug anything inside your own context. So let me get back to the project. Let's open up the code and navigate to our workflow. We'll edit it slightly. What I would like to do now will be adding 2 steps. The first one will show us who initialized the flow, and the second one will be debugging GitHub context. So let me hit right here and let's add a new name. I'll call it who initialized the flow. It will be a question. And what I would like to do now will be running a one-liner. So echo, and let's open up a string. Right here, I will use curly brackets, GitHub.actor initialized the flow. So what this step will do will be simply accessing the GitHub context, actor. So actor is no one else like the person who initialized the flow. Let me get back to the documentation and let's search for the actor. Right here, we can see that this is the username of the user that triggered the initial workflow run. Wonderful. So let's get back. And the second step will be name debug GitHub context. This time I would like to simply print out the whole GitHub context, and to do so I will use echo, introduce a string value. Similarly, we'll use this pattern to access the context, and what we would like to do now will be invoking the toJSON function, toJSON, and pass the GitHub context to it. So GitHub, let me verify that everything is specified correctly. Looks good. And if you are wondering what this function does, it does nothing else than returning a pretty print JSON representation of our GitHub context. So with all of that done, let's commit changes. Again, commit directly to the main branch. And let's find our action. As you can see, there is a cache in GitHub, but when I refresh, we'll see that the file was actually updated. We can see the workflow is running. Let's see the details. Wonderful. So, first the one-line script was run. Secondly, the multi-line. Let's see who initialized the flow. We can see the coderc block, which is my username, initialize the flow. Similarly, we have the debug GitHub context, and I find this pretty useful whenever I want to figure out the actual information. In some cases, it might be faster than going through the whole docs for you to look for the actual value. Whatsoever, when debugging, we don't have to worry about exposing our secrets. Right here, we can see that the token value was hidden behind 3 stars. So basically that's all for this step, and I hope you will find this useful in real life scenarios. So as the next step, let's figure out how to run a job after another job finishes successfully. To do so, let's get back again to our file, code, workflows 1.yam. I'll edit it and I'll get rid of these 3 steps so that we'll be on the same page. And in the beginning, I mentioned that we have one job named build. And in order to introduce the second job, I'll call it second job and simply add a new entry here. So second job. Excellent. As we can see, GitHub web application is pretty smart and allows us to check our YAML code. We can see that a job requires either runs on or uses. So in our case, I will simply copy the value from the first job. So again, we specify the runner on which the job will be running. In our case, this will be an Ubuntu worker. Runs on Ubuntu latest. Wonderful. We can see that the error disappeared. Following, let's add some step. Again, I will simply print out the text to the output. So steps. Name. As the name, I'll call it I run in the second job. And as the command, echo, and let's print hello from the second job. Wonderful. If I commit the changes at this point, these jobs will be run simultaneously. And in order to make our second job dependent on the first one, we have to use the needs instruction, needs, and specify the name of the job that we would like to run first. So it will be called build. If you would like to specify multiple jobs so that, let's say, second job will be run only if job 1, 2, 3 will be done, then you can use a list here, simply specify a bunch of build, another job, etc. At this point, again, we can see that GitHub app is pretty smart and figure out that invalid value is another. It doesn't detect this job, so I can delete that. And let's leave the list. It should be okay. With all of that done, let's commit the change. Again, commit to main. And let's wait for the action to start. Actions. Update 1. Right here we can see we have 2 jobs now, build and the second job. And we can see that this one is awaiting for the build to complete first. If it fails, the second job will not be run. So as we can see, both workflows completed successfully and our workflow too. And that's all for this video on how to set up a first GitHub workflow and configure it. If you are interested in this topic, then let me know in the comment section, and also do not forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. See you in the next videos.